Hola, mi amigos and amigas. Today we're finishing up the story by Isabel Allende, 2 words. During the month of September, October, and November, the colonel delivered his speech so many times that it had not been crafted from glowing and durable words. It would have turned to ash as he spoke. He traveled up and down and across the country, riding into cities with triumphal air, stopping in even at the most forgotten villages where only the dump heap betrayed a human presence to convince his fellow citizens to vote for him. While he spoke from a platform entered in the middle of the plaza, El Mulatto had his men handed out sweets and painted his name on all the walls in the forest, in gold frost. No one had paid the least attention to those advertising ploys. They were dazzled by the clarity of Colonel's proposals and poetic lucidity of his arguments, infected by the powerful wish to write. And this kind of reminds me of somebody we know in the White House. The wish to right the wrong of history, happy for his first time in their lives, wronging the rights of history, making it great again. When the candidate had finished his speech, his soldiers would fire their pistols into the air and set off firecrackers, and when finally they rode off, they left behind a wake of hope that lingered for days on the air like the splendid memory of the comet's tail. Soon the colonel was the favorite. No one had ever witnessed such a phenomenon. A man who surfaced from Civil War, covered with scars and speaking like a professor. A man whose fame spread to every corner of the land and captured the nation's heart. The press focused their attention on him. Newspaper men came from far away to interview him and repeat his phrases, and the number of his followers and enemies continued to grow. "We're doing great, Colonel," said El Mulatto after 12 successful weeks of campaigning. But the candidate did not hear. He was repeating his secret words. He did more and more obsessively. He said them when he was mellow with a nostalgia. He murmured them in deep sleep. He carried them with his horseback. He thought them before delivering his famous speech, and caught himself savoring them in his leisure time. And every time he thought of those 2 words, he thought of Belisa, and his senses were inflamed with the memory of her feral scent, her fiery heat, the whisper of her hair, and her sweet mint breath in his ear, until he began to go around like a sleepwalker, and his men realized he might die before he ever sat in the presidential chair. "What's got hold of you, Colonel?" El Mulatto asked so often that he finally one day his chief broke down and told him the source of his befuddlement. Those 2 words that were buried like 2 daggers in his gut. "Tell me what they are, and maybe they'll lose their magic," his faithful aide suggested. "I can't tell them. They're for me alone," the colonel replied, saddened by watching his chief decline like a man with death sentence on his head. El Mulatto slung his rifle over his shoulder and set out to find Belisa. He followed her trail through all that vast country until he found her in a village in the far south, sitting under her tent, reciting her rosary of news. He planted himself, sprawled-legged before her, weapon in hand. You're coming with me," he ordered. She had been waiting. She picked up her inkwell, folded her canvas of her small stall, arranged her shawl around her shoulders, and without a word took her place behind the mulatto's saddle. They did not exchange so much as a word in all the trip. And mulatto's desire for her had turned into rage, and only his fear of her tongue prevented his cutting words to shreds with his whip. Nor was he inclined to tell her that the colonel was in a fog, and that a spell whispered into his ear and had done what years of battle had not been able to do. 3 days later they arrived at the encampment, and immediately, in view of all the troops, El Mulatto led his prisoner before the candidate. "I brought this witch here so you can give her back her words, Colonel," El Mulatto said, pointing the barrel of his rifle at the woman's head. "And then she can give you back your manhood." The colonel and Belisa stared at each other, measuring one another from distance. The men knew that their leader would never undo the witchcraft of those accursed words, because the whole world could see the curious puma eyes soften, and the woman walked to him and took his hand in hers. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day.